My name is Donna. I'm 32 years old, living in Portland, and I own a small residential HVAC maintenance company. The job isn't glamorous, no high-riser office or designer suits, but it's something I built from the ground up after nearly a decade of tireless work. I'm proud of it, even if not everyone in my family feels the same. It happened this Thanksgiving, a day that should have been whole, but instead became the moment I realized my true place in the hearts of those I thought were closest. I had just finished a long maintenance job, leaving the client's house as the sky turned dusky. Driving home, I felt at ease. The business was closed for the holiday, all my employees had received their bonuses, and I had picked up a bottle of red wine from a high-end shop to bring to the family dinner. Ever since my dad passed away, every Thanksgiving my mom cooked a big feast, and everyone showed up. I had never missed a single year. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Ellen," I answered, still smiling. "Hi, Mom. I'm on my way home. Do you want me to bring apple pie or mashed potatoes this year?" There was a strangely long silence on the other end. Then she spoke, her voice a little shaky. "Donna, there's something I want to tell you, and I hope you'll understand." I frowned. "What is it, Mom?" "I think maybe this year you shouldn't come to Thanksgiving." My foot nearly slipped off the gas pedal. "What?" "It's just that Mason, Brittany's boyfriend, is bringing his parents over. They work in law, very traditional types. Brittany wants everything to feel a bit more formal." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my heart pounding. "You mean I'm not allowed to come? I'm not family?" "That's not what I mean, Donna. Of course you're family. It's just that Brittany feels you might give the wrong impression. What I mean is, because I'm an HVAC tech? Because I didn't go to an Ivy League school?" I cut her off, my voice already trembling. "Donna, don't make this more difficult." She sighed, her voice softening in that way I'd grown too familiar with. The tone she used when she was about to say something unforgivable, but still expected me to swallow it without complaint. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. "Do you remember who paid Brittany's tuition? I paid for all 4 years while she was in school in New York. Never missed a deadline. I gave her a future I never had." Mom went silent. Then she said weakly, "It's just one evening, Donna. We can see each other another time. Maybe a brunch." I hung up. I didn't cry. I just sat in my car, hands still on the wheel, feeling hollow, as if someone had torn out a part of me I didn't even know I'd been holding on to. An hour later, while I was sitting quietly in my apartment, a text from my cousin Madison popped up. "I thought you should know. Brittany told her mom you embarrass her. She doesn't want her boyfriend's family knowing someone in her house works with their hands." I read that line over and over. My grip on the phone was so tight, my fingertips left marks on the screen. Brittany, the same sister who once called me her hero when I gave her her first laptop at 18, the same girl I walked 3 snowy blocks for just to get rent money to her on time. Now, she was ashamed of me. And I knew, tonight, when everyone was sitting around the dinner table, toasting, laughing, no one would mention me. No one would save me a seat. No one would notice I wasn't there. Because in their eyes, I never really was. I still remember the next morning. The early winter sun slipped through the kitchen window like nothing had happened. I sat alone with a cold cup of coffee, the phone lying silently on the wooden table. I should have been prepping a pie, picking out a dress, getting ready to laugh with my family like every other year. But this year, all I felt was empty. I scrolled through social media without thinking. Then, like a punch to the gut, I saw the photo. Posted by none other than Brittany. She stood in the center of Mom's living room, wearing a bright red dress, hand in hand with Mason. The dining table behind them was perfectly set. Fresh flowers, lit candles, everything flawless. The caption read, "A warm Thanksgiving with the ones who matter most." I wasn't in the picture. Not a word about me, not a question about where I was. Just as I put my coffee down, my phone buzzed again. It was Madison. My cousin, the only one in the family who still called me for reasons other than favors. "You okay?" Her first message. I hadn't replied yet when the next one came. "I think you need to hear this, even if it hurts. Brittany told everyone you shouldn't come because she doesn't want her boyfriend's family to know she comes from a working-class background. She said, if Donna shows up, they'll think we live in a garage." I froze. I read it over and over, hoping I'd misunderstood or that Madison was joking in some cruel way. But I knew Madison wasn't like that. And deep down, I knew it sounded exactly like something Brittany would say. This wasn't the first time she had acted distant about my work. I once visited her dorm in sophomore year, wearing my dusty work uniform after finishing a job nearby, and she quickly pulled me into a corner, whispering, "Can you change shirts? Everyone here's in law school, it just looks weird." I let it go. I always let it go. I thought she was just young and embarrassed. I thought she'd grow out of it and realize a person's worth isn't measured by the starch in their collar. But I was wrong. I'd been wrong from the start. I had paid Brittany's Columbia tuition since the moment she stepped onto campus. Each semester cost over $18,000. I worked overtime, skipped vacations, turned down personal days, just to make sure she never had to worry about tuition, books, or housing. I never asked for a thank you. I didn't need Christmas cards. I just thought if I helped her build a good life, at the very least, I'd be welcome at the family table. But in Brittany's eyes, I wasn't someone to be introduced. I wasn't someone who mattered. I closed my phone, heart pounding. Anger, shame, heartbreak, disappointment, all swirled inside me like a storm with no way out. I stepped outside, watching the cars pass under a gray sky, and I understood. What hurt wasn't that I wasn't invited. It was being erased by someone I loved with everything I had. In that strange, quiet moment, I knew I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't keep living as the one who was always dismissed. I couldn't be the only one holding on to bonds that were one-sided. I went back inside, sat at my desk, and opened the folder labeled Brittany's Tuition Private. The line read, "Next payment due in 14 days, $18,740. I moved my cursor to remove payment method. A warning popped up. "Are you sure you want to remove your payment method? This action cannot be undone." I didn't hesitate. I clicked confirm. A soft click echoed as I closed the laptop, but inside me, it sounded like the latch of a door finally shutting. For good. The next morning, when the clock struck 7 a.m., I was already seated at my desk, a steaming cup of tea next to my laptop, which was open to the Columbia University login page. I entered my email and password. As always, the message, "Welcome back, Donna C.," popped up. The tuition payment section was clearly displayed. Spring term balance due, $18,740. Payment due, 14 days. I had stared at that message countless times, and every time I'd sigh, grab my wallet, and pay it right away. But this time, my fingers weren't shaky or hesitant. I moved the cursor to the button labeled Remove Payment Method. A small pop-up appeared. "Are you sure you want to remove your account information? This action cannot be undone." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then clicked confirm. A small ping sounded, and just like that, it was over. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone started vibrating. The first call was from Mom. Before I could pick up, another call came in, this time from Brittany. Both went straight to voicemail. I knew they wouldn't stop. I switched my phone to silent and got back to work. By noon, I was checking the HVAC system at Quinn and Harris law offices when my phone lit up non-stop. A quick glance, 8 missed calls, 14 unread texts. I knew I should have ignored them. But then, one message from Brittany made me pause. "What did you just do? The school said my tuition's unpaid. Your account disappeared. Call me back now." Right after that came a message from Mom. "Donna, You can't be this cruel to your sister. You know she has no one else but you. I stood frozen in the client's reception room, the clipboard in my hand suddenly cold. A chill ran down my spine, not from the A/C, but from the realization that, in Mom's eyes, I was just the only option to keep her daughter from failing. Not her daughter. Not someone who'd worked her hands raw for 10 years. Just a walking wallet. That afternoon, as I drove home, Mom's 13th call came through. I sighed and answered. Her voice immediately burst through, tense. Donna, you can't just walk away like this. Do you know how panicked Brittany is right now? I kept my hands steady on the wheel, voice calm. I know, and I think she should be panicking. Don't you think this is too harsh? Mom continued, voice cracking with anger. She's in her final year. What if she gets kicked out? I let out a short laugh. Mom, Brittany's old enough to understand the consequences of her actions. She's an adult, not a child I need to carry. You promised you'd help her until she graduated. I paused for a second. I promised to help my sister. But the Brittany you're defending today, that's not someone who sees me as family. I'm not obligated to keep enabling ingratitude. Mom went silent. Then, as always, she softened her tone, layering it with guilt. You're the only one in this family who can help. Are you really going to abandon your family? I bit my lip, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Family isn't made up of people who only call when they need a withdrawal. Family doesn't shut you out of dinner just because your job isn't refined enough. I'm not an endless ATM, Mom. A long sigh. Then her usual closing line. You've changed. I smiled bitterly. No, Mom. I've just finally started living as myself. I ended the call. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the white ceiling, letting the silence wrap around me. No more ringing phone, no desperate texts, no guilt trips. Then, a soft ding. A new message. Donna, I can't believe you'd do this to me. I've lost everything. Hope you're happy with your decision. I stared at the message for a long time. Didn't respond. Because if Brittany truly believed I'd destroyed her life with a single click, then maybe she never realized it was she who started destroying everything in the first place. I don't know what happened after Brittany's last message, because for the next 3 days, my phone stayed completely silent. No calls from Mom, no texts from distant relatives. Everything was quiet. And a year ago, I might have cried from the emptiness, but now, the silence felt like a rare gift. No expectations, no blame, no more playing the role of the selfless sister. I was reviewing technical documents at the office when Madison called. Have you heard? Her voice came through, hushed and urgent. Heard what? I asked, though my gut already knew. Brittany. She showed up at Jordan's house this morning. I frowned. Jordan? Brittany's boyfriend? No, ex-boyfriend now, Madison said, her tone low and deliberate. I sat upright. What do you mean? Madison took a deep breath. Mason broke up with her. He moved out of the apartment this morning. Someone saw Brittany crying in Jordan's yard for nearly an hour. I stayed silent. For the first time in weeks, I was genuinely shocked. You know why? Madison continued. Mason told his mom that Brittany lied about who paid her tuition. He thought her parents were covering all of Columbia's costs. When he found out it was you, her sister, he was speechless. A chill ran down my spine. Not from joy, not from vindication, but from the realization that Brittany hadn't just erased me from her life. She had replaced me with a version of reality where I didn't exist, just to fit into a world she thought she deserved more. How long did she lie to Mason? I asked. Almost 2 years, Madison said hesitantly. Mason said he felt like he'd been pulled into a long play where the lead character was never real. That afternoon, I received an email from Columbia's student office. Please note, the primary payment method has been removed from Brittany Calloway's student account. Her financial status is currently unresolved. Please update a valid payment method by January 10 to avoid withdrawal from the university. I didn't forward it. Didn't call Mom. Didn't inform Brittany. I just skimmed the message and closed my screen. But sure enough, Brittany reached out to Mason. They met that evening at a familiar cafe in the Belmont district. I wasn't there, but Madison knew someone who worked at the place, and word spread like wildfire. Mason was already there when she showed up, 15 minutes late, Madison recounted, her voice a mix of pity and unease. She wore a silk dress, full makeup, like she was trying to salvage the last image of perfection. And? I asked. Mason didn't let her say much. He asked her straight up, "Why didn't you tell me the truth about Donna?" I pictured the scene. Brittany's face going stiff, her hands twisting together under the table. She told him she was embarrassed, that she didn't want him to think she was taking advantage, that her family situation was complicated and she just wanted to keep up a good image in front of Mason's parents. I wasn't surprised. That was the kind of language Brittany always used, subtle, evasive, shifting blame while still sounding innocent. But Mason didn't buy it, Madison continued. He told her, "If you're mature enough to build a future for yourself, you should be mature enough to be grateful to the one who gave you that opportunity." I stayed silent. My heart ached, though I couldn't tell if it was for Brittany or because, for the first time, someone outside the family said what I never dared to ask for. Mason added one more thing, Madison finished. I can't love someone who's ashamed of their own family. Because if today it's your sister, tomorrow, it might be me. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Brittany had lost her tuition. Now she had lost her relationship, and the saddest part was, she still didn't understand why everything was falling apart. 3 days after that last call with Madison, I received a second email from Columbia. "This is your final notice. If tuition is not paid by the January 10 deadline, student Brittany Calloway will be automatically withdrawn from the spring semester enrollment. Please address this immediately to avoid disruption to academic progress." I read that line 3 times, but felt nothing. Not anymore. I had given Brittany more chances than anyone ever had, and all she did was turn me into something to be hidden, behind silk curtains. That night, Brittany called 6 times in a row. I didn't pick up. Her messages poured in. I know I messed up. I was just scared of being judged. "You can't do this to me. I'll lose everything. Do you not love me anymore? Were all those years just fake? If I get kicked out, my future is over, Dottie." I didn't reply. After the 10th call, I blocked her number. 2 days later, she used a different number to call again. When I blocked that too, the messages moved to email, Instagram, even LinkedIn. The last one read, "If you don't answer, I'll come find you." And sure enough, Brittany did the one thing no one thought she would ever dare to do. On Monday morning, while I was in a meeting with my tech team about a new HVAC contract for a coastal hotel chain, the glass door to the office flew open so hard the security chime went off. I looked up. Brittany stood in the doorway, hair messy, mascara streaked from crying, her heels caked in mud. "I need to talk to my sister," she shouted, freezing everyone in the room. I stood up, my gaze cold as steel. "This is a place of business, Brittany. You don't get to cause a scene here." "You're ruining my life," Brittany shrieked, her voice full of desperation. "You can't just cut me off like nothing happened." Before I could respond, security was already moving toward her, firm-voiced. "Ma'am, we need you to leave the building. Now." "Don't touch me," Brittany snapped, her eyes wild. "I'm the sister of the woman who runs this place." I stepped forward, calm and steady. "You're the sister of the person who runs this place, not the one running it. You don't have the right to disrupt my work because you refuse to face the consequences of your own actions. You're abandoning me," she yelled one last time. But no one reacted. No sympathetic glances, no nods of agreement. Just the cold silence and her heavy footsteps as security escorted her out. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. "Mom?" I hesitated, then answered. "Donna, what happened this morning?" Brittany called me, said she was kicked out of your office. She's humiliated. I said nothing, sipping my water slowly. Do you know what it'll mean if she gets expelled? Mom went on, her voice breaking. I know, I answered firmly. And I think she needs to learn how to take responsibility. Families don't turn their backs on each other like this, she snapped. You're her sister. I set my glass down, my voice steady. I was her sister. But to her, I've only ever been a tool. When I stopped paying, I stopped being family. Donna, I'm begging you. I cut her off. I didn't work myself to the bone for 10 years just to be labeled a shame. I took a deep breath. You should call the bank. Or learn to say no, like I did. I hung up. The next day, Aunt Carol called. Then Uncle Jeff. Even a high school friend I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade messaged me. Donna, is it true your sister might get expelled? People are saying you went too far. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I was certain of one thing. I was no longer a walking wallet. And I had learned that love cannot exist where there is exploitation. Not anymore. In the weeks following the office incident, I expected to be dragged into a never-ending battle with my family, and it came just as I'd predicted. Late-night calls, relentless texts, all wrapped in those two words. Blood ties. You're too cold. She's still your sister. Donna, people are saying you've changed. You don't care about family anymore. Words that, in the past, might have brought me to tears. But now I simply put the phone down on my desk, looked out the window at the pine trees swaying in the late-year wind, and let myself be quiet. No more defending, no more apologizing. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. One morning in mid-December, as I was reviewing ventilation plans for a new shopping center project, Madison texted. Just saw your mom at the grocery store. She said Brittany dropped out and moved back home. Honestly, they both looked rough. I stopped typing. My eyes lingered on the message. She also said, she still thinks it's your fault. I wasn't surprised. To my mom, accountability was always something that could be reassigned, and I was usually the one it got assigned to. Brittany failing because she couldn't face reality? Irrelevant. What mattered was that I dared to walk away. But instead of feeling sad, I felt relief. Because while they were still stuck in that loop of blame and denial, I was starting a new chapter in my life. With the money I used to spend on Brittany's tuition, I expanded my company, hired 2 certified technicians, upgraded to new carbon monoxide testing equipment, and even redesigned the office in a modern, neutral-toned palette. I also accepted a 3-year maintenance contract with a chain of coffee shops in the Pearl District. 6 figures. Now I work not out of fear of lacking, but because I truly love what I do. No one makes me feel less than for not wearing a corporate name badge. No one asks, so, when are you switching to a real job? No one sighs when I say I run my own technical crew. And most importantly, no one treats me like I'm invisible. On Christmas Eve, I sat alone on the couch, my moss green sweater wrapped around a tired body after a long day. Outside the window, neighbors' lights blinked in and out, and the sound of church bells echoed faintly in the distance. I poured myself a glass of white wine, planning to watch a feel-good comedy before bed. Then my phone lit up. It was a message from Mom. Donna, Christmas just isn't the same without you. Everyone misses you. Call me. I don't know how long I stared at that message. Maybe just a few seconds? Or maybe it was a whole lifetime folded into a single moment. I thought of all the Christmases past. I was always the one who brought the little tree, who wrapped everyone's gifts, who paid for dinner with money I could have spent caring for myself. But no matter what I did, I was always not presentable enough around company. I took a deep breath and gently deleted the message. Not because I didn't miss them, not because I never loved my family, but because, for the first time, I had learned to love myself more than people who never truly valued me. I don't expect Brittany to change. I don't expect my mother to apologize. I only hope that, from now on, I can live a life where I don't need permission just to exist. A few weeks after Christmas, as Portland welcomed the first cold, damp rains of the new year, I received a handwritten letter from someone I least expected, my grandmother, Evelyn Calloway. She hadn't lived with our family in years. After Grandpa passed, she moved to a small house in the suburbs of Salem, nearly a 3-hour drive away. I only visited her a few times a year during the holidays. But she had always been the one person in the family who never judged me for my career or lifestyle. All she ever asked was that I show up, with a smile, and the same calloused hands that built everything I had. The letter was written neatly, her handwriting slanted like the gentle tone of her voice. My dear Donna, I don't know exactly what's happened in the family lately, but I know this. When a woman like you finds the courage to set boundaries, many people will feel uncomfortable. Don't let that stop you. Who among them has ever sacrificed for you the way you have for them? I am proud of you. Not because of the money you make or the contracts you sign, but because you have learned to protect your own heart. I read that letter 3 times. Amid all the blame and guilt, she was the only one who saw me, fully, without needing an explanation. And I realized, maybe she was the first person who made me believe that choosing myself isn't a betrayal. I used to believe that family was unbreakable. That if I gave enough, they'd eventually love me, accept me, be proud of me. But I was wrong. Because no one is obligated to love you if all they've ever learned is how to take. And you are not obligated to sacrifice yourself just because someone shares your last name. I spent too many years living as though my worth was measured by how much I could give. Every tuition payment, every expensive birthday gift, every vacation I canceled to work more hours, I used to think those were acts of love. But the truth is, love doesn't ask you to hide who you are. Love doesn't make you feel ashamed of the job that feeds you. It doesn't require you to step back just so someone else can shine. If someone expects you to do that, it's not love, it's control. Dressed up as family. I no longer feel guilty for staying silent when mom texts. I no longer feel torn when relatives call me stubborn or cold. And I don't dream of Brittany showing up at my door with tears in her eyes hugging me, saying she was wrong. I don't need that anymore. I've learned how to hold myself, to stand firm in the storm of opinions, and to say, clearly, I wasn't born to be a backdrop in someone else's story. If you're in a situation like mine, where you give and all you get back is silence, judgment, or indifference, here's what I want you to remember. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It's an act of courage. Choosing dignity over dysfunction doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, it means you've grown. It means you finally know your worth. I don't know if Brittany will ever learn that lesson. I don't know if my mother will ever stop running from accountability. But I do know this. I will never go back to who I used to be. The one who quietly paid the bills but never got a seat at the table. The one who always did everything right but was still treated like a shame. And finally, I chose myself. Not to get revenge, but to finally live. Donna's story is a powerful reminder that family cannot survive without respect and recognition. In a world where people often judge by appearance or status, she found the strength to draw the line and choose herself. Not out of spite, but from self-worth. She shows us that love doesn't mean blind sacrifice. Saying enough to being used is the first step to reclaiming your value, in living a life that's free, worthy, and empowered. What do you think of Donna's decision? Was she right to set boundaries and put herself first? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real, and inspiring stories about family. I walked into the room with my shoulders tight and my heartbeat pounding clearly in my chest. The room wasn't big, but the cold overhead light and the ticking of the antique wall clock made it feel like I was standing in the center of a courtroom. Every eye turned toward me. No greetings, no friendly gestures. The air was thick, like they had gathered here to cast me out of their lives once and for all. The long table was covered in a white cloth, dark leather chairs lined up neatly on both sides, more fitting for a dispute than a memorial. I gripped the hand of my 8-year-old daughter, Lily. She looked up at me, her clear gray eyes reflecting the worry I was trying to hide. I smiled at her, stiffly, but just enough to keep her world from crumbling. "Karen, I see you still had the nerve to show up." The voice dropped the temperature in the room a few more degrees. That was Meredith, my sister. Her blonde hair was pinned up, lipstick a shade of red straight out of a 1950s fashion magazine. But her words were as sharp as a blade wrapped in silk. "Guess you didn't get the memo that Dad cut you out of the will last year." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had expected this reception, though my heart never quite got used to being cast aside by my own blood. I quietly pulled out the chair for Lily and sat next to her, the only seat left, farthest from the center of the table. At that moment, my uncle, Martin, leaned back in his chair and let out a dry laugh like he'd just finished watching a dark comedy. "I thought you'd at least have the decency to stay away," he said without looking at me. "Or are you here to say a final sorry to your father, though it's far too late for that?" Lily curled inward, her tiny hands clutching the hem of her dress. I laid my hand over hers, gently soothing, but my eyes remained alert, scanning every look from the people around us. Those who once called me niece, sister, daughter. Now they looked at me like a stranger, like my presence alone was an offense to this family. I couldn't remember the last time someone called me sister. Ever since I left the house after my marriage fell apart, I had been erased from every holiday, every phone call, every family story. Meredith told the tale of me leaving like it was a stain she had to bear, a burden she had to carry because I abandoned our father. No one asked why. No one cared to know why I left with Lily when she was just 3 months old and I hadn't even recovered from my C-section. I looked around the room. Once our father's small library. Old photos still hung on the walls, but I was missing from every one. They had cropped me out of the frames, and out of memory. Meredith was whispering something into her husband's ear, the man who'd never once welcomed me. Next to them sat our cousins, watching like they already knew the ending, just waiting for their happily ever after. The door opened. My father's personal lawyer, Mr. Donald, stepped in, carrying a brown leather briefcase and a thick file. The sound of his shoes was slow but certain. He nodded to everyone, but when his eyes met mine, he paused longer, not with sympathy but consideration. Everyone in the room thought they knew what was coming. They believed I had come to confirm once and for all that I had nothing. No message, no memento, no explanation. But they didn't know I wasn't here to beg. I was here because my daughter had said something to me yesterday. "Mom, if Grandpa still remembers you, you need to know. Let's go, okay?" And I said yes, not for my father, for Lily. Because she deserved to know the truth. Whether it was a long, heavy silence or a surprise no one saw coming. I breathed slowly, still holding Lily's hand. Across the table, Meredith smirked in triumph. But I kept my gaze on Mr. Donald, who had just placed the briefcase on the table and was beginning to open it. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but somehow I knew this story wasn't over. Meredith crossed her legs, arms folded like she was chairing a shareholders' meeting, not her father's will reading. Her tailored gray suit and sparkling wristwatch shimmered under the overhead lights, a silent announcement. She was the chosen one, the rightful heir, the only Jefferson name their father still acknowledged. I glanced at Lily, still sitting quietly beside me, her small hands neatly on her lap, eyes scanning the unfamiliar room. She said nothing, but I could feel the tension in her. The way she tilted slightly toward me, seeking safety, made me squeeze her hand tighter. No matter what anyone in that room believed, I was still Lily's mother. And if I had to endure being rejected once more, at least this time, I wouldn't go through it alone. "No one needs you here, Karen," Uncle Martin suddenly said. His voice was raspy, like someone who had lived too long on bitterness and cigarettes. "Your father was clear. You're out of the will. You know that, right? Or are you still clinging to some fantasy he'd forgive you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Words like that didn't hit the way they used to. Uncle Martin, like many in that room, clung to an old image of me. Karen the weak, Karen the defiant, Karen who walked out on the family for a marriage Dad never approved of. They didn't know, or didn't want to know, that the man I once loved was gone, leaving me alone with a baby and sleepless nights at my desk job. I didn't leave to betray. I left to survive. Beside him sat Aunt Celia, a woman who hadn't called me once in a decade but sent birthday cards to Meredith every year. She looked at me, eyes narrowing, not with anger, not with disgust, but pity. Cold, sharp pity that cut deeper than any insult. I turned away, determined not to let that gaze burn into my mind. "Some people really don't know shame," Meredith said, her voice calm but calculated. "Why are you here, Karen? To hear the lawyer confirm again that Dad erased you from his life?" I lifted my head and looked straight at her. "I'm here because I have every right to be. Whether you like it or not, I'm still his daughter." The room went still for a beat. A few people glanced at one another like they'd just been splashed with cold water. My response wasn't loud, wasn't angry, but clear enough for them to understand. I wasn't here to beg. I was here because I belonged. I sat in silence, listening to the wind slip through the window crack, mixing with the soft scratch of fountain pen on paper as Mr. Donald flipped through his notes. Everyone waited, not to remember, but to confirm positions, shares, entitlements. It felt like a private auction, where people were valued by loyalty and how well they played their roles. A soft chuckle came from the left side of the table. It was Edward, my cousin, the one who once built sandcastles with me on Cape Cod when I was 10, now laughing like I was the family's running joke. "Still think you have a chance?" he muttered, just loud enough for Lily to hear. She turned to me, her little face suddenly steely. It wasn't fear I saw. It was disappointment. Not in me, but in the world. She was beginning to see more clearly. "Lily," I whispered, gently brushing her hair. "It's okay. Just stay with me, all right?" She nodded, lips pressed tightly. She was stronger than her 8 years, and I knew, if there was any reason I hadn't fallen apart in front of those eyes, it was because of her. At the head of the table, Mr. Donald tapped his pen lightly against the folder. His calm voice filled the room. "If everyone is ready, I'd like to begin." Everyone straightened up. Meredith folded her hands like she was ready for a victory speech. Uncle Martin leaned back, eyes narrowed like reading between the lines. Aunt Celia pulled a handkerchief from her purse, as if bracing for some emotional crescendo. And me, I just held Lily's hand, because I knew my name wouldn't be in the opening lines. But like every room that once turned its back on me, I had learned to walk in, head held high, and wait to see who feared the truth more than I ever did. I used to think that if I stayed silent long enough, the whispers behind my back would fade away. But as the years passed, they only grew louder, clinging to me like smoke that refused to clear. My family never cared why I left. They already had a story. I was the daughter who didn't know sacrifice, the one who abandoned her father when he needed her most. The selfish sister who ran away from family duty. That story, crafted by Meredith, amplified by Uncle Martin, gradually became the unchallenged truth no one bothered to question. They didn't know, or didn't want to know, that I once came back. 3 months after leaving my husband, I brought Lily to my father's door, carrying her in one arm, a single suitcase in the other. I remember it was drizzling that day, not enough to soak my hair, but enough to chill the air. I knocked, hoping that no matter how angry he was, my father would still open the door. He used to say, "Family is the last place that won't shut its doors on you." But that day he did. The old oak door closed, cold and silent, like the period at the end of a sentence. I stood under the porch for nearly 2 hours. Lily was 6 months old, crying nonstop from hunger and cold. It was my father's neighbor, Mrs. Graham, who finally came out, pressed an umbrella and a business card for a single mother's center into my hand. I walked away as darkness fell, without looking back. From that day forward, I understood that if I wanted to survive, I had to learn how to no longer need anyone from that house. I rented a small apartment in the suburbs of Newark. My first job was a night shift cashier at a convenience store. Then I slowly moved into part-time bookkeeping for an insurance company. Everything was slow, but peaceful. I did everything I could for Lily, from mending torn sweaters to saving every spare coin to buy her books. Our life wasn't glamorous, but at least it didn't include accusations or contemptuous stares. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still thought about my father. Not out of anger, but because I still hoped. Hoped that maybe he had come to understand something, or at least wondered why I had left. He was the only one who ever taught me how to untangle a fishing line, how to arrange lilies so they wouldn't wilt. He was the only one who ever truly listened when I said I wanted to study interior design instead of accounting, but after I married someone he disapproved of, a free-spirited artist, emotional and impulsive, it all collapsed. He didn't like who I chose, but what he never understood was that I chose to break free from a family where emotions had to be polished before being presented. After that marriage, when the man who once painted me pictures turned into the man who yelled at me daily, I knew I had to stop. But when I came back with our daughter, my father only one person knew the whole story, Mr. Donald, our longtime family lawyer. Last year, when he called to verify some documents related to a scholarship fund, I asked him directly, "Did my father ever mention me?" He hesitated, then said softly, "I believe he was still following your path." That answer didn't erase the years I'd been shut out, but it was enough to keep a flicker of hope alive, that maybe, somewhere deep down, a part of the old father still remained. And maybe that's why I came to the will reading today. Not for the inheritance, not to fight for anything, but to see if, in his final moment, he left something. Not the house, not the retirement fund, but a line, a message, something to prove I was never completely forgotten. I looked around the room, at the faces waiting. They thought I came to beg. But what they didn't know was that the only thing I ever wanted was something money couldn't buy. The truth. And I had a feeling that somehow that truth was getting very close. Mr. Donald set the folder down on the table, his eyes sweeping the room as if weighing the air. The room fell silent. The only sound was the soft rustle of pages between the tension. I could hear every heartbeat in my chest, steady but fragile, as if one deep breath could shatter everything. "The last will and testament of Mr. Harold Jefferson," he began, his voice deep but steady, like someone who'd read hundreds of wills but still respected every word. Meredith leaned forward slightly, hands neatly folded, eyes gleaming with triumph. Next to her, her husband Brandon pulled out his phone under the table, probably texting the architect they'd spoken with last week. They had already been planning renovations to the main house before our father even passed. "I, Harold Jefferson," Mr. Donald continued, "being of sound mind and judgment, do hereby divide my estate as follows." I heard the words, but they felt distant. Each sentence hammered deeper into the reality I had suspected. My name was not there. "To my eldest daughter, Meredith Jefferson, I leave the entire main house and the adjoining property, along with all furnishings and valuables contained within." Meredith raised an eyebrow, saying nothing, but I saw the subtle curve of her lips, a silent but unmistakable victory. "To my brother, Mr. Martin Jefferson," Mr. Donald went on, "I leave the lakeside property, including ownership of the cabin and the fishing boat." Uncle Martin nodded, his expression unchanged, but I knew he was pleased. He loved that lake more than anything, except control. "To my nephew Edward," Mr. Donald paused to flip a page, "I leave the vintage car collection along with all titles and related accessories." I looked at Edward, my cousin who hadn't even looked at me at the funeral. Now he stroked his chin. nodding like it had all been predetermined. I said nothing, but each word, each sentence, was confirming what I had braced myself for. I had no place in this will, not even a line, not a note, not a goodbye. And then the line came, like a clean cut slicing through what little hope remained. And as previously stated, Mr. Donald slowed his reading, my youngest daughter, Karen Jefferson, shall receive no portion of this estate. The room went dead quiet. No one spoke right away. But a heartbeat later, Meredith let out a soft snort of laughter. "Told you," she whispered to Brandon, but loud enough for me to hear. Uncle Martin shook his head, casting a look of mock pity toward me. "Takes a special kind of person to turn their back on their own father," he said, with that half-joking tone he always used when speaking of me, like I was some side note unworthy of discussion. Lily sat beside me, not fully grasping the words but feeling the heavy silence all around. She turned and whispered softly, "Mom." I gripped her hand tighter, holding back the emotion. I had known this was coming. I had played this scene out in my head 100 times. But nothing prepares you for seeing your name officially erased from your father's life, in front of your entire family, without feeling something fracture. I took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the wood grain of the table where the light struck in almost hypnotic swirls. Around me, murmurs began. Meredith was saying something to Brandon about starting basement renovations early. Edward was already on the phone. I caught snippets like, "Move the cars into the garage this weekend." No one spoke to me. No one asked what I was thinking. They had ended this long ago. I was just the late arrival to a play that had closed years before. But what they didn't know was this. I hadn't come to claim anything. I came to listen, to confirm, and if needed, to close the last unfinished chapter in my heart. I didn't need the house. I didn't need the things. What I needed was the truth. I hadn't yet decided whether to get up or quietly wait for everyone to leave when Lily suddenly turned to Mr. Donald. Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't rushed, but clear enough to freeze the entire room. "You forgot the video he recorded." Everyone turned. Meredith, Uncle Martin, Edward, Brandon and his wife, even Mr. Donald furrowed his brows. I looked at my daughter, my palm suddenly cold. I whispered, almost breathless, "Lily, what are you talking about?" She didn't look at me. Lily's eyes stayed on Mr. Donald, calm and direct, strangely composed for an 8-year-old. She reached into her small backpack, pulled out a slightly wrinkled white envelope sealed carefully with brown tape. On it, in familiar bold letters, "For Mr. Donald. Only if it gets ugly." I nearly choked. I recognized that handwriting instantly. It was my father's. "Lily, where did you get that?" I asked, voice trembling, my hand shaking as I gently touched the envelope. Lily turned to me, her eyes clear and steady. "The last time I visited Grandpa," she said, "he gave it to me and said to keep it safe. He told me to give it to Mr. Donald if people forgot something important." No one said a word now. Meredith tried to maintain her composure, but I could see her lips pressed tightly together, her face growing pale. Uncle Martin leaned forward, and Edward slowly set his phone down on the table. Mr. Donald took the envelope with both hands, his expression filled with caution, as if he were holding something more valuable than any legal document. He glanced at me, then at Lily, before carefully opening the envelope. Inside was a small black USB drive and a folded note, also handwritten, signed at the bottom. He skimmed the lines briefly, then looked around the room. When he spoke, his voice no longer carried the tone of a lawyer doing his job. It sounded like someone holding a secret too heavy to keep. "This is a video recording made by Mr. Harold Jefferson prior to finalizing his last will. He left instructions that it should only be played if the reading of the will became contentious." He paused, then added, "And I believe today meets that condition." Meredith let out a short, bitter laugh. "This is absurd," she said, her voice higher than usual. A video of unknown origin has no legal standing. Uncle Martin jutted his chin. There's no proof it wasn't altered. Harold never mentioned this to me. But Mr. Donald was already on his feet, walking to the laptop on the side table. He plugged in the USB and within seconds, a single video file opened. On the screen appeared my father, Harold, seated at his desk in the familiar study. He wore the light brown cardigan I had given him years ago. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his eyes looked straight into the camera. The room went completely still. I felt the world freeze as my father's voice came through, hoarse but clear. If you're watching this, Karen, it means things didn't go as I hoped, and I'm sorry. I turned to stone. His voice continued, slow and steady. I know you're being left out of the will, and I agreed to it at the time, thinking it was the right thing to do. But the closer I got to the end of my life, the more I reconsidered. And I realized I was wrong. Wrong to believe what others told me. Wrong not to ask you once why you left. I couldn't hold back the tears. Beside me, Lily clutched my hand tighter, as if she'd always known this moment would come, and had waited until I was strong enough to face it. I met Lily, he continued, his expression softening. She didn't say much, but when I asked her about you, she said, Mom is the safest place in the world. The murmurs behind me faded. I heard only his voice, the voice of a man I believed would never understand me, now admitting fault, calling my name with a tenderness I thought had vanished forever. On the screen, my father's face, Harold Jefferson's face, looked both foreign and heartbreakingly familiar. He no longer had the stern expression I remembered. Instead, he looked gently tired, like someone finally releasing a weight he had carried too long. Karen, he said, his voice rougher and deeper than I remembered. If you're watching this, then the will didn't go as planned, and maybe that's my fault. I felt frozen. My hands were numb from gripping Lily's so tightly. The room was silent, pulled into every word echoing from the tiny speaker. For years, I let pride and anger drown out everything, he went on. I believed Meredith when she said you left to avoid responsibility. I trusted Martin when he said you'd turned your back on the family. I didn't ask. I didn't investigate. I just closed the door. And because of that, I lost you. Those words cut like a blade, but the kind that peels away the layers I'd built to survive since walking out of that house. When you came back holding Lily, he said, I remember looking out the window. I saw you standing in the rain. I saw the look in your eyes. And I still didn't open the door. Because I thought I was right. I thought you owed me an apology. I heard Meredith shift slightly in her seat. Brandon lowered his head. Uncle Martin crossed his arms, his lips pressed into a hard line. They were trying to stay composed, but none of them could ignore the truth unraveling in my father's voice. And now, looking back, he continued, staring straight into the camera like he was speaking directly to me, I see it clearly. You were the bravest one in this family. You left when there was no other choice. You protected your daughter. You stood on your own after everyone turned away. You didn't come back for money. You came back because you deserved to hear what I should have said a long time ago. I couldn't stop the tears. They fell silently, not in a rush, but steady, like every year of pain was finally being washed away. I'm proud of you, Karen, he said, his voice dropping low, thick with remorse. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making you believe you weren't enough, weren't worthy, weren't loved. The truth is, you made it through all of it with your heart intact. Lily looked up at me, her clear eyes pulling at something deep in my chest. I wanted to hold her close and cry. But I stayed still. My father wasn't done. And because of that, he said, I revised my will. One final version, sent directly to Mr. Donald, fully executed and legally binding. The air in the room thickened. I leave this entire house to you, Karen, he said, along with my savings account, retirement stocks, and a scholarship fund for Lily. I want her to have the chances you didn't. I heard someone inhale sharply, Maybe Edward, maybe Meredith. Uncle Martin leaned forward, clearly about to object, but Mr. Donald raised a hand to keep him quiet. I know this will upset some people, my father said, as though reading their reactions through time. But I'm not doing this for fairness. I'm doing this for truth. And the truth is, you deserve every good thing I can leave behind. The screen began to fade to black, but before it disappeared, he looked into the lens one last time, his gaze softening. Exactly like the way he used to look at me when I was little and scared of summer storms. You are my daughter, he said gently, and I love you. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it. Live well, for yourself and for your daughter. Don't let them take your heart again. The screen went dark, no music, no effects, just silence, deep and heavy, like a final confession. I sat there, still clutching Lily's hand. Inside me was a storm, not of rage or regret, but of something I hadn't let myself believe in for years. My father had heard, my father had seen, and in the end, my father chose me. The room sat in thick silence after the screen went black. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. Everyone seemed frozen between two worlds. One filled with the cold calculations they'd just been discussing, and the other where the truth had just thundered in like an unexpected winter storm. Meredith was the first to break the silence. Her chair scraped back suddenly, screeching across the floor. Her face was pale, but her eyes still clung to the last shreds of pride. No, no way, she said, her voice shaking but clipped. He never changed the will. I took care of him. I was with him until the very end. No one replied. Brandon stood up more slowly, trying to place a hand on her shoulder to calm her, but Meredith shoved him off without a word. She stormed toward the door without even glancing at me. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving behind a cold emptiness in the space where she had been. I didn't feel triumphant, just quiet. Uncle Martin, still seated, stared at the USB as if it were something that could bend reality. He turned to Mr. Donald, voice low and tense. How do I know that video was real? He could have recorded it before he started losing his mind. Mr. Donald calmly sat back down, both hands resting lightly on the table. The video was recorded 2 weeks before Mr. Harold passed away. It is time-stamped and legally notarized. Additionally, I was present when he signed the revised final will. Uncle Martin clenched his jaw, clearly trying to find an angle to argue, but there was nothing to hold on to. Everything was legal. Every word my father had spoken in the video and every portion of the estate that had been reassigned had been thoroughly processed within the bounds of the law. It was strange that a man like him, so quiet, so disciplined, chose to end it all with such a dramatic twist. Edward, my cousin, who had once looked at me with thinly veiled contempt when I walked in, now sat frozen like a statue. I glanced over at him and saw his face caught in a storm of emotion, part disbelief, part confusion, that my father, the man they all assumed had taken their side, had ultimately chosen mine. I didn't think he'd actually do it, Edward mumbled, unsure who he was speaking to. Then he stood, grabbed his coat, and quietly left the room. No one stopped him. A few other relatives followed. No comments, no farewells. Just silent backs walking away, leaving behind empty chairs like quiet witnesses to a truth that could no longer be denied. I stayed seated, still holding Lily's hand. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her relief. She'd held on to this secret longer than I realized, and now she could finally exhale. Only the three of us remained in the wide room, me, Lily, and Mr. Donald. Mr. Donald gently closed the folder, his voice deeper now and softer. The revised will is going to be sent to each involved party, along with documents confirming its legal validity. There will be some paperwork to sign, but everything is already arranged. I nodded, unable to find any words. I thought I'd feel pain or anger or the urge to scream at the world for all the years I was left behind, but I didn't. What I felt was peace. Not the hollow kind of silence I used to endure during long nights in that cramped apartment while Lily cried. Not the awkward hush at family gatherings where no one spoke to me. This was a quietness filled with resolution, the kind that only arrives when the truth finally speaks. I looked around the room where my father once wrote meticulous notes, fixed the old wall clock, folded paper airplanes for me when I was little. This room, which I thought no longer belonged to me, had opened its doors again. This time, not to shut me out, but to welcome me back. "Thank you," I said to Mr. Donald, my voice soft but firm, not just for doing the right thing, but for listening to him. He offered a faint smile, stood up, and left the room with footsteps as light as the change that had just taken place. Lily looked at me, her eyes shimmering with something I hadn't yet put into words. Maybe pride, maybe relief, or maybe a new kind of belief, that no matter how long it takes, the truth always finds its way. The room now held just the three of us. Me, Lily, and Mr. Donald. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the large window, casting a golden hue across the wooden floor, warming a space that once felt unbearably cold. I stayed seated, as if my mind hadn't yet caught up to everything that had just happened. I had been given the house, once a place of rejection, the savings account, the college fund for Lily, the entire estate everyone believed would go to Meredith, was now mine. But what I walked away with from that reading was worth far more than property. It was recognition. "The revised will goes into effect immediately," Mr. Donald confirmed once more, noticing I hadn't spoken. "If you need any legal assistance, I'm here to help." I nodded, managing a faint smile in place of words. But my throat was tight. All my life I had longed to hear one simple thing from my father. That he believed in me. That I was worthy of love. And now I had that. Not in words alone, but in undeniable action. A video, an apology, a rewritten will. All of it was my father's way of saying, "I saw you." I looked down at Lily. She was still sitting quietly, her small hand in mine, her wide eyes taking in the dust-laced corners of the room, like she was trying to remember every detail. "You did good, Lily," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you." She tilted her head and smiled. "I just wanted you to hear him." I brushed her hair gently. "You kept a really big secret." Lily nodded proudly. "He said to wait for the right moment. I thought today was it." I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. My daughter, just 8 years old, small and silent, had carried an entire truth for months, only to bring it into the light when no one could deny it anymore. Not Meredith, not Uncle Martin. No one could take that truth from her now. I stood up, the weight on my shoulders falling away. No more shame, no more fear or second-guessing. I moved slowly across the room, glancing at each chair, remembering every look that once held contempt. Now, those eyes were gone, leaving behind a silence big enough to echo the truth. As we stepped outside the grand doors, the setting sun bathed the stone steps in gold. A cool breeze passed by, and I shivered, not from cold rejection, but from the gentleness of spring's first wind. A breeze that hinted at something new. I paused at the top of the steps, gazing at the house that had once only symbolized pain. Today, it was no longer a place I'd been cast out of. It was where my father called me home, through his final will and his final words. "Do you want to see Grandpa's room?" I asked Lily. She squeezed my hand, eyes sparkling. "Do you?" I thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, but not today. Today I just want to go home, with you." We stepped off the porch together. I looked back once more, then exhaled deeply. Everything that needed to be said, he had said. Everything that needed to be done, he had done. The rest was mine to carry. The small car waited by the curb, sunlight glinting off the windshield. I opened the door for Lily, and she climbed in with a lightness that said she had laid down a heavy burden. I walked around to the driver's side and slid into my seat. As the engine turned over, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror, my eyes still misty but no longer sad. Steady. Free. Whole. I once walked away from that house in tears and loneliness. Today, I walked away with my daughter, the truth behind me, and the future ahead. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the one left behind. I was the one who had been seen, heard, and finally I could just be me, no more proving required. From someone cast aside by her family, Karen journeyed through pain and silence to reclaim herself and the truth. Her father's long overdue acknowledgement wasn't just a gift. It was proof that strength and dignity are never in vain. In real life, Karen's story reminds us, even when misunderstood or rejected, your worth isn't defined by momentary approval, but by your courage to live honestly, love yourself, and trust that truth will one day rise. What are your thoughts on Karen's journey and the choices she made? Share with us in the comments below. And don't